Hello, everybody. This is the Goose giving you my 2 cents worth of feedback on what's happened, what's transpired in the last week of politics. You notice this background looks like an old newsreel from the 1930s, and I wanted to give the full effect because I think that that's what's happened. I think that we've just entered the 1930s when it comes to politics in the United States. I've always been some kind of a history buff. And you notice that in Europe in the 1930s, economically, there was a very bad depression worldwide. This was causing havoc on the political scene. And I think there's a lot of parallels in terms of politics, what's happening here. However, the economics are kind of more complicated now than they were then. However, I do think that what's happening now is a result of the economics of the past decade, where there's been such a decimation of the middle class. And now there's a bigger income gap in the United States between the very rich and the very poor than there ever has been since the statistics have been kept in the era of FDR back in actually in the 30s. This is very ironic. However, I don't want to digress because I do want to focus just on one thing. The question that I would like to ask to everybody is, has the United States crossed the line in terms of bigotry? I think this past week shows that, yes, we have crossed the line. Not only has bigotry pretty much permeated every facet of society here, but now it's in the offices of power in Congress. I'm referring to Representative Omar's anti-Semitic remarks that she's repeatedly made. The more that it's called to her attention, the more that she emphasizes it. And she's trying to disguise it as funding dollars to Israel. And I think that's a load of bull. I think that there's a lot of anti-Semitic sentiment in this country. As an example, I went ahead and floated out my disgust of her comments out on Twitter, and you can find my Twitter feed. Just look up the Goose, and you'll see me there. I am shocked by the amount of anti-Semitic sentiment that is supportive of Omar's comments. Now, up to this point, I was puzzled and perplexed as to how someone like that would get elected, because she has a history of public bigotry. And how would she be elected by the good people of Minnesota? How could this happen? Well, apparently her sentiment is more common than anyone wants to admit or believe. You just go out there, look at Twitter, look at Facebook. Even if you don't like social media, which I certainly understand, I'm not a big fan of it, but it does reflect what the sentiment of the country is, I think, very accurately, especially with the younger generation. And this is the biggest concern I have. The younger generation, in my book, that means anyone from 28 or so or younger, has this anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, Palestinian sympathetic type of outlook, and it's very discouraging. Congress couldn't even pass a resolution to condemn Omar's comments specifically. Instead, they had to water down the bill, and Nancy Pelosi should be ashamed of herself, which she did. But they had to water down a bill and to condemn all kinds of bigotry, to even mention in there to condemn anti-Islamic phobias, which I'm also against. However, this is not about anti-Islamic phobia. This whole thing came about because Representative Omar has this hateful language towards Israel. And she knows darn well that if the United States pulls all of its funding and all of its foreign aid to Israel, that Israel overnight would be attacked militarily and in every other way by all of its neighbors that would love to wipe it off the face of the earth. This hatred towards the Jewish people disgusts me. I just know what bigotry is. It disgusts me at all levels, whether it's black versus white versus black, against Muslims, against the Jews, against the Catholics. It's all the same, and it's disgusting that this country has crossed the line. We are institutionalizing bigotry, starting with anti-Semitism, as the pattern always is. I implore everyone, look at the history of Europe in the 1930s. Look at how anti-Semitism started to rise up to the surface, just like it's doing here. And look what happened. Countries such as Germany, countries such as Italy, countries such as Spain, they became dictatorships and fascists. And that's where we're heading.